Hello, friends, and welcome to Medicine Stories, where we are remembering what it is to be human upon the earth. I am your host, Amber Magnolia Hill, and this is episode 48. Today I'm sharing my interview with Emilee Saldaya of the Free Birth Society. I was interviewed on Emilee's Free Birth Society podcast a couple months ago. You can listen there. I talk about my two daughters, very different birth stories. The first was a free birth, or as I now conceive of it after interviewing Emilee, my ancestor assisted birth in 2006. And I mean, it truly was, as I believe all of our births are, because birth is in your bones if you're a woman. And the second birth, a midwife and ancestor assisted birth in 2016. So one really fell outside the dominant medical paradigm, and one fell under the midwifery model of care. And they were both wonderful. And I love birth, and I love birth stories. And as I tell Emilee, I can't believe it's taken me this long to actually talk about birth on the podcast, because I always intended to. And as I shared in the very first episode, episode number 1, I had been wanting to start a podcast since 2006 when my oldest was born. And back then it was going to be related to birth and mothering and breastfeeding and herbal home care for children. And I love that it evolved into what it is now, but I'm also really happy to be returning to my roots and my original vision by talking about birth. Emilee is wonderful, so whip smart, and really has thought through things that I have never thought about before. So on that note, she says some things that will be controversial to some, that will be triggering to some people. And as always, I invite you to keep going, to sit with it, to hold nuance, to let yourself be challenged. You can hear that she challenges my thinking with something she says. And I welcome that. I love when that happens. When I hear a piece of information that like it's hard for me to take in because it totally goes against something that I believe. I soften and I open to it, and I give it some time, to really listen to what the person's argument is and what they're saying, and then see where I come out at the end of holding the nuance and holding the space to possibly have my mind changed. If we are not staying open like that and changing our minds, we are calcifying, we're solidifying, we're aging too early, we're not evolving and growing. So I love that I have really attracted an audience of people who are capable of critical thinking and nuanced thinking. You all are so smart and open. My mind is just blown all the time by posts and comments in the Medicine Stories Facebook group and on my Instagram posts. And just thank you so much for being those people in this culture right now, because there's not a ton of them, a ton of us, a ton of you, and it's really needed. So thank you so much. The Patreon offerings for this course, there are 2 of them. One is for patrons at the $2 level, and one is free for everyone. So the one that's available for patrons at patreon.com/medicine stories is a $50 off coupon code for the Free Birth Society's online course, The Complete Guide to Free Birth, a self-guided online intensive course that will teach you everything you need to know about how to birth freely and in your power. And they make it clear on the website for this that it's not just for people who are going to have a total free birth with no medical assistance or, official of some sort, even a midwife in attendance. If you're just planning a free birth, or if you just want to be more empowered in mammalian birth. This perspective, this framing of remembering that we are animals and that we are mammals. We're a very specific kind of animal who has a very specific cascade of hormones that get released in the birth process for optimal birthing, and that almost everything we do today in birth disrupts the natural cascade of hormones that every mammal has evolved to release to have the best, most healthy birth for mother and baby. So yeah, I love that phrase. I know it probably doesn't work for everyone, but if you want to know the physiology behind mammalian birth and to empower yourself to have that sort of birth, check out their online course, and the link will be there in the Patreon post. And then the second Patreon offering is an audio clip of what Emilee and I talked about after the official interview was over. So in the last minute of this interview, she mentions vasectomy. And then we like said our goodbyes. And then I was like, wait, Emilee, like tell me more about vasectomy, because Owen and I had an appointment for him to have one. And he had already gone to the first appointment, like the informational appointment. And this is something we'd gone back and forth on forever, trying to figure out if this was right for us. And, you know, I was really coming at it from the perspective of like, women take on all the burden when it comes to birth control and childbearing. And can you just do something? Can you just step in and do something for once, you know? Which is totally valid, but it also didn't really ever feel good to us. And as you'll hear in that clip, we had actually already canceled the appointment, but postponed really in our minds. I'm not gonna give you the details, but it's a short clip and it's really informative, and I just appreciate what Emilee has to say. And, you know, let me say here too, I just want to make it really clear, though Emilee does say this in the interview, that we have no judgment around how individual families and women and female-bodied people choose to birth, choose to have vasectomies or not, you know. But what Emilee is critiquing, and I am aligned with her in this, is the system, is the dominant medical patriarchal birthing paradigm that is so far removed from our innate physiology. It's absurd and insane. So keep that in mind. Again, if this is something that might sort of trigger you because you made different choices, like it's not on you. It's not on you. It's on the culture that you were born into. A very quick listener shout out. This is a iTunes review from Kara Witt, who wrote, "I don't know why it's taken me so long to review your podcast, Amber. I've been listening since day one and absorbing each wise, rich conversation through my ears and through my skin, feeling so nourished by what comes through. I truly feel that the mythic journey of my life, which at times has felt much more subtle or imperceptible, has been teased out and made accessible through the beautiful stories shared here." I really love that because that's exactly my intention. Keep following the mythic threads of your own unfolding path, and in sharing people's medicine stories, it's exactly what I hope to inspire. So you'll notice that even when I'm interviewing someone like Emilee, where we're really talking about the work that they do, and we could get super heady and intellectual with it, we always go into their personal medicine stories. And my favorite one in this interview is about the dolphins. I mean, I was crying. I had tears coming out of my eyeballs as Emilee was telling this story. It's so, so beautiful. So you're in for a real treat in a few minutes here when you get to listen to the dolphin story. I really also just loved this idea that Emilee framed for me of the matriarchal home. And I realized that I do have a matriarchal home. I have a home in which I am centered and my daughters are centered. And it's not in a way that my husband's perspectives or opinions are meaningless. We're a total team. But he he listens to me. He's not trying to dominate. He's not bringing that toxic, patriarchal, masculine energy to our interactions or our conflicts or our decision making. And I've been in a relationship like that. And I left that relationship because it was not working. It wasn't working in the home and it wasn't working for the family. And, it's just biologically speaking, and of course, here I'm talking purely about cis hetero couples, but looking at the evolution of our species, women and the womb havers and the birth givers, our senses are more attuned. They're more attuned to our children, and they're more attuned to all humans, and to the social unit of the family. So generally speaking, most of the time, women are going to have the better perspective or idea. I don't even know if better is the right word, just like more in alignment with the truth of the family unit and the humans in it, the tiny humans in it. So my relationship now works so much better than my relationship then, and my family works better now because I am allowed that space. It's hard to talk about, and I don't want to offend anyone, and I really don't think I'm going to offend Owen by talking about this because he's just like naturally one of those amazing men who innately understands this, that like when women lead, it is better for everyone. And of course, he sometimes gets frustrated with my opinions and my desire to, have my decision be the one that we make or whatever. But the conversation also reminded me of something, I believe I brought this up one time before on the podcast, but of this diagram that I saw once in a Taoist medicine book. And so it was a male and female form. It was just like a line drawing, and it was showing how in the Taoist medical belief system, how energy runs through male and female bodies. And through the male body, came from outside, through the head, down, and out the penis. So it was like very, and outward. And in the female drawing, the energy drew up from the earth, up into the vagina, and then into the woman's center, heart space, if I remember correctly. And I remember the text saying something like, this is why everyone is attracted to women, not necessarily sexually, but just wants to be around women. This is why mothers are, revered as they are. Why most children at least slightly prefer the mother and the mother energy. Why Mother's Day is just a little bit bigger of a deal than Father's Day. No offense, guys. But I always remembered that perspective from Taoist medicine. I always remembered that diagram. And when Emilee brought up this idea of the matriarchal home, I was like, that's exactly it. That's what she's talking about there. So I just want to give a little farther perspective and more of my thoughts on this idea, because I think that anyone who has lived in both homes know which one works better. And even if you haven't, you can immediately, instinctively understand what the difference between them might be. And it's just something to hold and to like uphold, as a nice way to structure families and homes. I know it's not always easy, especially if you got one of those toxic patriarchal dudes in your life. Final thought here is that in the vasectomy talk, if you listen, Emilee briefly mentions vaccines. I haven't talked about vaccines since episode 30 with Scylla Whatcott, which has been the third most downloaded episode, and people still write me about it to thank me for it all the time. The innate intelligence of the immune system. And I'm not going to talk about them right now, but I have been talking about them a lot on Instagram and Instagram stories in light of the totally insane legislation coming down right now here in California with SB 276 and across the nation. If you're not tuned into it, there's different mandated vaccine bills in a lot of states right now, and many of them are being defeated. In one state, even religious exceptions were upheld. Here, they're trying to completely take away medical exemptions for all intents and purposes, which means no matter what your genetic predisposition or if your four siblings all had severe life threatening or even life taking reactions to vaccines, you have to get them. It's crazy and it's an issue of medical freedom. And so, anyway, if you would like a shit ton of information as it's been filtered through my brain, most of it coming from actual books written by actual doctors, you can see the highlights at my Instagram profile, which is Mythic Medicine. If you're not on Instagram, you can do instagram.com/mythic medicine and you can see the highlights there. And yeah, so it does though tie into what Emilee's talking about here because it's about medical freedom and bodily sovereignty. And if you care about what's happening with abortion right now, then you should care about what's happening with mandated vaccines because it's the same thing. It's taking away bodily sovereignty from women and from parents over their children, and it's crazy. Many parents who have vaccinated their kids are still staunchly opposed to this legislation because it's so over the top. So, again, not going into it. Find it on Instagram. Thanks for listening. And now let's get into this incredible interview with Emilee Saldaya.